Sup peeps, Roxel here. In this video, I'll be ranking every tameable creature that spawns on ARK Survival Ascendant's Extinction in terms of its usefulness. Note that this will not be including any creatures that are exclusive to other maps, and this will only be considering PVE purposes on Extinction itself. Let's begin with the F tier. At the bottom of the F tier, we have a bunch of creatures with what I'd consider just bad combat abilities, and low to no utility at all for the most part. In no particular order, those are Dodo, Lycosaurus, Diplocalus, Dilophosaurus, Compi, Mesopithecus, Hyaenodon, Arthropleura, Uranio, Trudon, Titanoboa, Terrorbird, Pulvoscorpius, Dimorphodon, Pachyrhinosaurus, Pachy, Capro, Microraptor, Onyx, and Sarco. Whew, that was a lot. The only ones I want to point out as the best in this are the Sarco and Dimorphodon. Sarco is an okay-ish fighter on land, but gets outclassed by a lot of things in my opinion with mediocre base stats. It often does better in water, which this map doesn't have a lot of either, unfortunately. The final one, Dimorphodon, I do think could get some use in fighting the Desert Titan in particular. They can output some pretty good damage if we breed them a good bit, but honestly the only reason they can work is because the Desert Titan's attacks stink, rather than the Dimorphodon being good in particular for it. Other flyers just outclass it too, usually. Next in the middle of F tier are a bunch of mobility creatures. Megaloceros, Megalania, Lymantria, Iguanodon, Gallimimus, Archaeopteryx, and Pteranodon are okay-ish ways to get around the map. Again, though, just a lot of things in the future tiers outclass these guys in my opinion. You could try and use them to distract the Titans for whatever reason, but it is extremely risky with those attacks one-shotting most things. Next up, we got some creatures with some niche utility, those being Dimetrodon, Hesperornis, Carriku, and Ichthyornis. Dimetrodons are okay if you don't want to put in the work for air conditioners, but aircons are pretty dang easy to get on this map with scrap metal and electronics everywhere. Hesperornis can very rarely give you golden eggs, which is alright, and you can also make an organic polymer farm with Carriku, although organic polymer is pretty easy to get on this map normally with corrupted nodules already. Finally, Ichthyornis can be used to get prime fish meat early game as well as normal prime meat if flyer carry is enabled. At the top of F tier, we got a bunch of berry gatherers because I like berries. Morellatops, Parasaur, Paracer, Triceratops, and Diplodocus are all solid berry gatherers. Only two I want to point out are Parasaurs because of their radar ability maybe being useful for OSDs to find missing corrupted creatures, and Paracers having access to a platform saddle for some goofy strats. In the D tier, these are dinos I just consider okay-ish options all around, but nothing stands out. Megalosaurus starts out at the bottom. It is a really good fighter, comparable to the Rex even, but it has the problem of only being usable during certain points of the day. This can be really annoying on Extinction if you got an OSD you would want to do with a Megalosaurus, as if it's daytime hours you just can't do it. Also at the bottom we have Carno, Sabretooth, and Raptor. Decent combat abilities to possibly do easy and medium drops, but otherwise not much use. Procoptodon and Tapejara both have pretty solid movement options to get around the map if need be, but I do think there are better options we'll get to later. Phiomia's main attribute is the ability to poop like crazy when force-fed stimberries, which can be really good for getting fertilizer. With the Dung Beetle's changes to auto pick up nearby creatures' feces, however, I will say this guy doesn't feel as necessary for crop farming as it used to be. Office spawn pretty frequently in the snow globe, and can be a nice way to get mutton/hide when tamed for the map. Still not super useful in my opinion, as kibble is better than mutton, and hide is pretty easy to get on Extinction typically. Equus are a decent mobility tool to get around the map, act as a mobile mortar and pestle, have a kick to knock out creatures, and the ability to create lassos to drag bodies. Not super useful stuff late game, but a pretty solid early game tame. Bronto's combat abilities are pretty lackluster, but where it does shine is in its berry collection being one of the best in the game. It does also have a platform saddle if you want to do some goofy strategies. Bizobufo and Akatina are both solid ways to get cement paste on the map, but I will say the OSDs do give you quite a bit already more often than not, so it's probably not something you need to do late game necessarily, which is why they are in this tier. Carmonemes can be a very tanky creature, so using it to bait corrupted creatures during OSDs isn't an awful idea if need be. Velociraptors have the ability to shoot a ton of spikes like a machine gun, and this can be useful for taking down flyers during the OSDs. The only problem, however, is that their stats aren't really that amazing, so you're going to have to do some insane breeding to get some decent ones in. It also seems to be a big problem right now where a lot of those spikes get no regs and don't hit, which definitely lowers their DPS by quite a bit. Kentros can be a fun addition to OSD fighting, as they can act like sort of spike walls around it to protect it, doing big recoil damage to anything that bites them, and with the addition of Vegicase can be pretty tanky. This does take quite a bit of work with breeding and such though, so not what I would consider a top option. We also got Direwolves at the top of the D tier, as their damage can get pretty crazy if you got a pack of them. Not super amazing base stat wise, and not having saddles can hurt. Final creature in the D tier is the Baryonyx, as unfortunately I think Extinction is its weakest map. These do thrive in caves because of their small size and ability to swim, but Extinction's caves are massive with no required water sections, so they aren't really needed. When it comes to OSDs, they're definitely solid still with their base stats, but they're just much better options. Enforcers begin our C tier here, and definitely got a lot better on the switch to ASA. This is because of the addition of the Bob's Tall Tales Tinkering Desk, allowing you to get some insane level enforcers combining weaker blueprints together. This, unfortunately, is not something everyone has access to though. Even if you do get insane level enforcers, however, they still aren't the best thing in the world with their base stats. It can get quite expensive too to make those high level ones. Megatherium and Spino are in this tier for a similar reason, that being super specialized only working in certain OSD scenarios, but when they do work, it's epic. Megatheriums when bugs are around, and Spinos when there is shallow water. Armadoggo has a lot of minor utility with their different saddles that can be useful early game, but I honestly haven't found myself using them a ton when tamed. Kind of just a thing I like giving pets every now and then. Next we got a bunch of resource creatures in the middle of C tier here for a similar reason. Those being Moschops, Direbear, Giant Bee, Dung Beetle, Doedicurus, Castoroides, Thorny Dragon, and Ankylosaurus. Moschops are good for fiber, Giant Bees and Direbears for honey, Dung Beetles fertilizer, Doedicurus stone, Castoroides and Thorny Dragon wood, and finally Ankylosaurus for metal. All can be really handy on the map if you need these specific resources. Then at the top of this tier we have the Chalicotherium and Allosaurus. Both pretty solid creatures to use for OSDs, I'd say. On top of solid stats and Vegicake usage, the Chalicotherium has a ranged boulder throw attack that can do some real good damage from a distance. A creature I'd honestly consider for hard OSDs even. And same goes for the Allosaurus. These guys have solid base stats, and on top of that they have a pack ability that makes the pack leader take less damage, and a bleed ability to take down those high HP targets quickly. This can be really nice for the hard and legendary OSDs when you got those super high HP and rage creatures. Going into the B tier, just like Allos, Thylas can be extremely good at taking down those high HP creatures with their bleed. The reason why I consider the Thyla above the Allo, though, is because their mobility is insanely good and can be handy for getting around the map, and also just getting away from things in general if a fight isn't going your way. Stego, Woolly Rhino, and Mammoth are next up here as all solid options for herbivores to use on OSDs. Stegos have really good tankiness with solid DPS, while Rhinos can get crazy high DPS if given enough room to build up charge, and finally Mammoths can cause corrupted creatures to do less damage with their call ability. The thing that's important about all of these is that they can use Vegicakes for really good healing. Rex and Therizino are next up here, as they both got similar stats. Both are good for OSDs, but Rexes have more HP, and Theris do more damage. So definitely not the best options for those OSDs, but I do think Theris top Rexes overall, as they can use Vegicakes, and also really good resource gathering creatures if you don't want to use them for combat. The Daedon is always a solid support creature for OSDs if you want to put in the work, with the ability to heal nearby creatures constantly as long as it has food. And it heals itself quite a bit too, making them really hard to take down. The Quetzal is here, as I do think is one of the better options to tame the Desert Titan still. Even though you can't do the foundation strat in ASA, you can still build a little box around your player to completely negate the swarm from knocking you off. It can be a solid option just for fighting the Desert Titan too with their high health stat, but it will be harder to find good static Quetzals on this map. The Pego is in B tier because you can pickpocket your friends. Seriously though, the Pego is now actually super useful on Extinction. This is because they can auto pick up gacha crystals for you now, which is huge. Other than that, they don't really have any other uses, but again, just having something being able to pick up gacha crystals is super nice. Scouts are also a neat little thing to use, with a night vision ability to see creatures easily. The main important thing about them, though, is the ability to heal enforcers and mechs. This is a huge perk that makes them pretty much a requirement to have if you have either of those robots. Menagarmr has fallen from grace quite a bit from ASE, with its new breath being a miss instead of a beam, and damage in general not really being that amazing. I still think it does have its uses in PVE on Extinction, as it can be one of the best options to get through caves with their insane mobility. They can just jump over everything. At the top of the B tier, we have what I consider the weakest of the Titans, the Desert Titan. I consider it the worst mainly because its AI still isn't very impressive, and it typically dies pretty easily in the King Titan fights if used there. I think it can still shine, though, using it for OSDs. If you put that dude on aggressive sitting above a legendary OSD, it can actually be a solid support creature just lightning striking everything from above. He can be nice for defending your base too against a bunch of those little craps. The Uranus I have at the bottom of the A tier, as I do think it can be one of the best support creatures still. It's hard to get used out of in those Titan fights as it can die pretty easily, but if ridden by somebody it can do really well on those OSDs and fights being a huge difference maker with its Courage War buff. Unfortunately, its Furor does not work on corrupted creatures though. The Oviraptor is next in A tier due to its super handy ability to automatically pick up eggs for you. This is just such a huge difference maker for breeding, it's hard for me to put it anywhere but here. The Otter's Insulation buff can be super handy on Extinction due to the variety of temperatures this map gives you. The ability to grab multiple artifacts is super handy on Extinction 2 in particular, as you are pretty much forced to do the Titan fights 3 to 4 times if you want to fight the Alpha King Titan. Argentavis is next in A tier for me here, as if you don't have access to Wyverns, I would say it's probably the best option on Extinction to kill the Desert Titan. Super tanky and good damage makes these dudes really good. Even before and after the fight they can have their uses, getting reduced weight on a variety of resources. Another flyer we got in this tier is the Extinction original Snow Owl from the Snow Dome. Snow Owls have really good mobility with their dive, predator vision to spot creatures easier, and a super good healing ability to heal your creatures between fights. This can be super handy if you find your creatures getting low during an OSD, or just between those big fights in general. Another passive ability they have is producing owl pellets instead of feces, OSTs, which is good for boosting up gacha resource production. Another super handy creature I found for this map is the gas bags. Just because of their insanely high weight stat and good mobility, they feel required for bringing any materials back to base you get from an OSD, as they'll drop a crazy amount of loot that's difficult to get back. This high weight stat can be used for general resource gathering as well even, as their mobility is pretty unmatched once you get those mechanics down. Next we got what I consider the second strongest Titan on the map, the Forest Titan. This dude's health stat as an alpha is pretty insane. In those King Titan fights, he'll just never die, making him feel like kind of a requirement for them. You can even use him in the legendary OSDs as well if you can deal with my man's super low mobility stat. I do think the next two creatures, Arch and Giga, are better for those OSDs. They have much higher mobility and can do things like get mate boosted and imprints. When it comes to which is better, I'd just say the Karch is better overall for OSDs, while the Giga is better for the Titan fights. This is because Karch only does better when it has a lot of creatures to kill, and those Titan fights typically don't have that while the OSDs do. Now for our final tier, we got what I consider the best of the best when it comes to Extinction. Starting out, we got the top dog for resources, the gacha. These guys can produce an insane amount of resources for you passively as long as you get them something to eat and snow owl pellets. This kind of resource gathering is unmatched, as you can just AFK for a lot of it and let them do the work. The addition of Pegos has been a huge boost to them as well, as they can auto pick up those crystals for you, making sure they don't despawn. If that crafting skill stat is high enough, they can even get you some pretty good quality gear too. Even if you don't want it, you can just grind that up for even more resources. Just an insane creature all around for resources that I think no doubt deserves this S tier spot. Next we got what I'd easily consider the best Titan, the Ice Titan. Once you get this dude, legendary OSDs become a piece of cake. He's just 1 or 2 shots pretty much everything, as he does 10 times more damage to corrupted creatures. It has the mobility to easily get away if need be. Getting to those OSDs is a lot easier too with that mobility. Even in the King Titan fight, this dude stands his ground pretty dang well, with the Gamma and Beta King Titans being fairly easy if you got this guy on the battlefield. Another thing that is huge for the Titan fights and OSDs is the mech. These things can output an insane amount of damage as long as you got the element for them, and they can protect your player extremely well. They really shine during those Ice and Forest Titan fights, as you can do bonus damage with the mech, and can really help you get those guys tamed. I do think it's nice to use during the Gamma and Beta King Titan fights as well, as your player is really protected when you're inside the mech compared to riding a creature. You can find and create some insane mechs too if you do legendary OSDs and or use the Tinkering Desk from Bob's Tall Tales. Now the creature I consider the best for Extinction goes to the newly added Dreadnoughtus. At first, admittedly, I had a bit of doubts on their strength seeing how slow it attacks, but oh man, does it just do so much freaking damage when it does hit. As long as there is somewhat big creatures around, which I mean is always the case on this map, this dude will just destroy anything in its path while being pretty much unkillable itself. When I played through this map normally with my friend, we just used Dreadnoughtus on the Forest, Ice, and King Titan fights, as well as the hard and legendary OSDs, and they easily took care of business in all of it. So much damage and health can be outputted if you just got a squad of them, and honestly they aren't that hard to get, with them spawning pretty frequently and element being super common on the map. Guide to tame these guys on the top right if you're curious. That's going to conclude my tier list for every single Extinction creature spawn. What did you think of this ranking, and what would you possibly change about it? Feel free to let me know in the comments. Thank you all for the love you support as always. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Rock skull. All you want to do is stream all night. Lobby full, rock skull. Never gonna play with me, but it's alright.